Bring the ship back up to combat alert L. I want everyone at their station.
Men, keep your eyes downrange, fingers on your triggers, and we all go home in one piece. Am I right, Marine? Sir, yes, sir!
Lock and load your weapons. Let's be ready to move. Good luck, Mason.
Now would be a very good time to leave.
For this gang, going for real safe distance.
What is that thing, Lieutenant?
Hell if I know. We're landing on it. Damn! Air brake failure. Right by impact!
Chief? Chief, can you hear me?
Affirmative. Echo 419 inbound.
The Covenant presence here is stronger than I anticipated. They seem to have the entire region secured.
The ring has some kind of deep religious significance.
They call it Halo.
They believe that Halo is some kind of weapon. One with vast, unimaginable power.
If Halo is a weapon, and the Covenant gain control of it, they'll use it against us and wipe out the entire human race.
That's not going to happen.
Give him hell, Marine.
Get out of here before it's too late!
Do you ever just sit and ponder about great creations from the past and how certain aspects of those great creations have now become the norms in whether it be society or a specific industry in which this product was created for? I know when I think of the video game industry, for example, I think of Halo, the franchise that revolutionized console FPS gaming, that stood near uncontested when it came to competitive console FPS games, and has created a large, diverse, and passionate community who truthfully divulge themselves in all aspects of the franchise, and how all of this started from one little game. This little game, and the franchise that followed suit, has been a major component of my entertainment and hobbies for as long as I can remember, and I know that it's the same scenario for countless other people out there. I wanted to make this video to go over the history of Halo, more specifically Halo Combat Evolved. I want to highlight the features and changes that Halo Combat Evolved brought to the first-person shooter genre and how it differs from the other FPS games of its time. And most importantly, I want to go over the lasting impact the Halo Combat Evolved had on not only console gaming, but video gaming as a whole. So, let's stop dilly-dallying and let's take a look at the marvelous, spectacular, and absolutely superb Halo Combat Evolved. Halo games are well known for having chaotic, troubled, and overall interesting developmental cycles. The games in the franchise go through so many different variations and designs that some wonder what a finished version of, say, the Halo 2 we saw at E3 2003 would be like. Halo Combat Evolved is no different, except I would argue that the different versions of Halo Combat Evolved that came before the game we got in 2001 were a lot more, well, how you say, varied. Look at it this way. Halo 2 and 3 did in fact go through many different iterations, but the framework that they were FPS games that focused on the Master Chief and maintained the same principles that made Halo, well, Halo, were all still there. But Halo Combat Evolved actually started as a completely different type of game than the wonderful FPS game we got in 2001. Halo, which was the original title of the game before Combat Evolved was added by Microsoft after the acquisition of Bungie, was originally going to be a sci-fi real-time strategy game based on realistic physics and a 3D terrain. This version of the game was being built for the PC and Mac systems as a side project of Bungie's software products, which is what they were known as at the time. Bungie, at the time in 1997, was a small 15-man team well known for the Myth and Oni games respectively. During the 1999 Macworld Conference and Expo, Steve Jobs announced that Halo would be releasing for Mac and Windows simultaneously.
We are starting to see some great games come back to the Mac, but this is one of the coolest I've ever seen. This game is going to ship early next year from Bungie, and this is the first time anybody has ever seen it. It's the first time they've debuted it. And so I'm very happy to welcome on the stage Jason Jones, who is the co-founder of Bungie and the Halo project lead. Halo is the name of this game, and we're going to see for the first time.
More news regarding Halo was shown at the 2000 E3 event, in which the first major overhaul of Halo and its mechanics were unveiled. This version of the game was a third-person action game, and you can watch this E3 trailer/gameplay deal on YouTube even to this day. This version of Halo was the last iteration of the game that was made for the PC platform, as later on in July of 1999, Microsoft revealed that they had acquired Bungie Software, now Bungie Studios, and used the game as the flagship title for their new video game console, the Xbox. An important feature that was present in Halo Combat Evolved originally was the online multiplayer, which had to be scrapped because Xbox Live wasn't going to be finished by the time Halo Combat Evolved released. There were a variety of cut levels and assets that were originally going to be present in Halo Combat Evolved. For example, as stated by the developers in the 2007 developer commentary playthrough, there was originally going to be a level that had the same purpose as Captain Keyes' speech about Halo on the brig of the Truth and Reconciliation.
Alright, what level did we cut that necessitated this cinematic?
Oh,
do you remember?
I don't remember.
Coming here was reckless.
But there's some choice dialogue that's about to happen. Where Captain
Talk about
Keyes,
exposition.
Yeah, well, you know, he is Captain Exposition. That was our nickname.
Yeah, no, tell me about the level we cut.
I can't remember
I
which
seriously
level
don't
we
remember,
cut.
but I mean, it's all familiar, but...
We cut the level where we, in a more elegant way, described this.
Right.
Here it comes. What do they call it?
They call it Halo.
Well, of course they do.
Accessing the Covenant battle net.
Chief takes it in stride. Come on.
Yeah.
Chief knows exposition when he hears it.
A level where the player finds out the truth about Halo and its purpose, independent from exposition by the captain. Another really cool difference was that the game was originally going to contain Covenant engineers, which we wouldn't see until Halo 3 ODST. These assets were completed, but they were cut due to time constraints. They were cut so late, in fact, that they're still mentioned in the Prima guide that was released for Halo Combat Evolved. A weapon that didn't make it into the Xbox version of Halo was the flamethrower. However, we all know this weapon did make it into the 2003 PC port. It was even originally slated to appear in the level Keyes, in which it would be used to burn Keyes' skull out of the proto-grave mine to get the neural implant, instead of just simply having the Chief punch him in the face. Which, if you ask me, the flamethrower method is a lot more metal. The silent cartographer's whole premise was also going to be very different. Instead of looking for the cartographer, the player was originally tasked with killing the Prophet, who was in search of the cartographer. This was also cut and instead used in Halo 2, where you kill the Prophet.
What, Jones, was the original objective for this mission? Do you remember?
It's sort of becoming the theme of the evening, but I don't remember, Joe.
It was to kill the Prophet, who was trying to find this silent cartographer. Remember, you were supposed to, the Prophet was going to go, he was getting the map, and you were supposed to go and assassinate the Prophet, which like most good ideas that we don't execute on the first time around, we save for the next game.
Are you saying?
Awesome.
At the end of the day, Halo Combat Evolved was molded as a product of the time. While revolutionary for the gaming market, it was still without a doubt very simplistic in nature. Even with this simplicity, Halo delivered new features and changes that absolutely revolutionized the FPS genre and console gaming as a whole. Let's take a look at the features and changes that Halo Combat Evolved brought to the console gaming market. This is the fun part. When you think of industry-changing games, what do you think of? I think of Quake and Doom, maybe even Grand Theft Auto. Hell, we can't leave out Super Mario Bros. Or even Pong. But when it comes to the console gaming market, none stands higher than Halo Combat Evolved. There is a large variety of changes and features that Halo implemented, and many of them have been adopted and replicated even to this day. The first and probably biggest change was the control scheme. For the longest time, FPS games had been relegated to PC because the mouse and keyboard provided the needed versatility to make a FPS game function properly. However, with the revolutionary twin-stick system, FPS games could be played on a gamepad with relative comfort and ease. This was done by allowing one thumbstick to function as the aiming/looking stick, and the other for movement, rather than both being done on the same single thumbstick, like consoles of old. This feature is what gave birth to console FPS accessibility, and is why this is the most important feature, in my opinion. Another major feature Halo brought was the two-weapon system. FPS games prior to Halo, look at Quake and Doom as examples, had the player carrying around their entire arsenal in their backpack, and with the ability to scroll through every weapon you found, weapon strategy was as simple as using the most powerful weapon available at the time, and of course maintaining ammo. Halo changed this by only allowing the player to carry two weapons at a time. This created the need for players to think about which weapons they should keep for an upcoming firefight, and created a new type of weapon balancing strategy that has existed since Halo's inception. A small feature that ties into both the two-weapon system and the control scheme is the allocation of a separate button for grenades and melee, rather than having the grenades and melee count as a completely separate weapon from the other firearms in their inventory. This is shown by being able to melee and throw grenades regardless of what weapon you have equipped, rather than having to switch to a melee or grenade individual separate weapon to use them. The artificial intelligence of Halo Combat Evolved is very well known for being pretty advanced for the era as well. The AIs in Halo were very adaptive to the dynamic situations of each individual battle from the campaign. For example, grunts would freak out and run around frantically if their elite superiors are slain in combat, and jackals will attempt to flee once they've taken so much damage. All enemies are also capable of diving out of the way of grenades and vehicles, and elites will charge the player when their shields and/or health is low, or go berserk once they've taken a lot of damage. A lot of the FPS games of old usually revolved around the player running around a closed arena, on foot, shooting enemies, collecting keys, and whatnot to progress to an endpoint. While the general idea of killing enemies and progressing to an endpoint remained the same, Halo implemented vehicular combat on top of infantry gameplay. This mixture of fairly easy to operate and interact with vehicles and infantry gameplay allowed for a much greater variety in map size and design. Halo implemented wide open ranges and fields for the new vehicular combat sections while also using the tight corridors and arenas for infantry sections. It's also important to note that the wide open areas for vehicular combat did not force the player into vehicles. They had the choice to continue in vehicular sections on foot or with the vehicles. And if the player decided to take the vehicle, they could also dismount whenever they pleased, and were sometimes forced to dismount to open doors or to continue into the smaller corridor arena segments. A few other notable changes and features were the use of a rechargeable energy shield. Most FPS games of the time had armor, which when depleted had to be reacquired through armor pickups scouted around the level. While Halo continued using health packs for the player's actual HP, the energy shield, or armor in this scenario, would regenerate while the player was out of combat for a certain period of time, and did not rely on armor pickups. Halo Combat Evolved also revolutionized split screen and implemented the LAN functionality to console gaming. Halo Combat Evolved allowed for co-op campaign and 4-player per console multiplayer. The highlight of all this is, of course, the LAN functionality. LAN allowed for up to 4 consoles to play together on a local area network, which is what LAN stands for. And if you do the math, that's 4 players per console on 4 different consoles, so that equals a 16-player multiplayer bonanza. This LAN functionality is what gave way to the console esports craze that still envelops a lot of console FPS titles, and among them, Halo's esports scene has still been thriving to this day. The last thing I wanted to go over was just how amazing Halo Combat Evolved's graphics were for the time. Many remember the wide open ranges and the Forerunner architecture, which, kind of dated by today's standards, looked absolutely beautiful for 2001. On a side note, I personally think Halo Combat Evolved has overall held up quite nicely. Sure, some things look pretty dated, but overall I think the game still looks absolutely gorgeous. I am sure there were a few changes and features, or whatever you want to call them, that I didn't mention in this section of the video, and feel free to drop them down in the comments below. With all that being said, it's one thing to change the playing field for console games and FPS games, but what does all of that change really mean if they aren't implemented long term? That's an issue and a scenario that Halo has not had to face, simply because many of the changes and features that Halo implemented went on to be adopted in almost every FPS game to succeed it to some degree. Quite a few of the changes and features went on to become industry norms and are still prevalent in almost every FPS game on the market, regardless of platform, not just, Xbox or PlayStation. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at some of the changes that started in Halo and have become industry norms. You would think this would be the longest part of the video, but that simply isn't true. The changes that Halo Combat Evolved brought to the industry and those that were adopted by the industry are one and the same. Of all the things I listed in the previous section, a few of them were picked up and carried along by the industry. The first and probably easiest to identify change was the 2-weapon system. Just look at almost any shooter game on the market, whether it be Battlefield, Call of Duty, Gears of War, Star Wars Battlefront, Insurgency, the list goes on and on. Most all of these games have a 2-weapon system and allow the player to usually only carry 2 weapons at a time and balance which weapons they need for a specific scenario throughout the level or match or whatever. A small but still noticeable change that Halo set was the advanced AI. Most FPS games post Combat Evolved use the same style of highly adaptive AI, and AI is a major point of technological advancement that is often referenced in new games. Even to this day, that's something that they always talk about when they're talking about a brand new game, how advanced and adaptive this new AI is. Well, Halo kind of started that. Another interesting change that most shooter games have adopted is the dedication of a specific button to melee and grenades. This ties in with control scheme. You can reference quite a few of the aforementioned games, not all of them, but a few of the games I mentioned at the beginning of this section, and find that melee and grenades don't require switching to a dedicated weapon to perform these actions. Although you can't really attribute the next change solely to Halo, it did make a large impact in the field. You could argue that the concept of regenerating health started in Halo Combat Evolved with the regenerating energy shield, but we all know that the regenerating health wasn't introduced full swing in the franchise until Halo 2. However, as many have before me, I will still give it a mention because it was a foundational building block for regenerating health in future games. LAN functionality is a big one that is still implemented to varying degrees in some FPS games on the market, specifically ones with a popular esports scene. There are probably a few other features that I didn't mention in this section or the previous one, and as I said before, feel free to leave them in the comments. Well, now that I've gone over that wonderful bunch of information, we've arrived at the end of the video. There's a ton of good information about Halo Combat Evolved and Halo in general out there. I surely have no shortage of things to make videos on. That's just one thing I absolutely love about the Halo franchise. That and its wonderful community. I really hope you guys all enjoyed this video. I know it wasn't perfect. I know I didn't get everything, every little nook and cranny, every little detail all sorted out and put into this video. But like I said, I hope that you all enjoyed it. I hope it taught you maybe a couple of things you didn't know about Halo and the development and, you know, how Halo impacted the gaming community, the gaming market, the gaming industry, whatever you want to call it. And can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Peace.